Fantasy author Natalie Johanson lives in the beautiful mountain valley of Utah with her two cats, Watson and Holmes, an adorable wife. She spends far too much time staring out of windows, drinking tea, and buying books she'll never have the time to read. Her debut novel, Shadow's Voice, quickly became an award-winning book. The award-winning series, The Shadowstalker, continues to grow and monopolize much of her time and focus, not that she had much to begin with. And in today's episode of Author Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Natalie Johanson. How are you doing today, Natalie? Lovely to have you on.
Yep, doing great. It's thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm excited as well that we're here to sit down across countries and continents to have this conversation around the beautiful title. So thank you once again for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Yeah,
invite.
absolutely. So, Natalie, we are going to get actually into the nitty-gritty of what inspired you to write In Debt Company, which I believe it's such a beautiful title for a book, and of
Thank
course,
you.
which is the first
Thank
book
you.
in the Shite and Soul series. But then you've been a
hmm
writer now for the amazing past 10 years, and you've published multiple titles, even aside from In Debt Company. I am curious to ask you about your first creative
hmm
spark as a writer, that thing that forced you
hmm
on, that keep you going on this journey unstoppably, that keeps you firing on without getting tired, that thing that fuels you, that constantly fuels you in to write and write and write on and on. If you can also tell us about how you choose the title for this book, that would be great. I think I've got a lot in that single question, actually.
Yeah. Yes, that's a lot. No. So my first creative spark to be a writer was way back in sixth or seventh grade when I written her eighth book is coming out this week actually. One of my favorite series that just really got me into reading and it made me want to write my own stories. So I draw a lot of inspiration and a lot of oomph from her. And so
Yeah.
that's what started it. And then as I just grew in my writing, I just wanted to tell more stories. And then that turned into really the books that I have now.
Hmm.
Um, this newest book, In Death Company, I wanted the title to be kind of punny because the two main characters, one of them is Death, so the other main character is in her company all the time. So it's quite literal that she's in Death's company. But then the May, the human witch character, she also works in a field dealing with death. So
Yeah.
she's in Death's company quite often because she's investigating deaths and homicides and stuff.
Hmm. That sounds like an amazing novel to me, and I love the description of that, how the title name come to be. So beautiful and so awesome. And if you have a
Thank
copy of the book close by, I'd like you to show it to the
you.
camera, just so we can see what it looks like.
Ta-da! Yep.
That's a beautiful cover.
I'm quite pleased with this cover.
Oh, it's
Thank
amazing,
you.
really.
I'm quite happy with it.
Hmm. It's so amazing. Thank you.
I'm always thanks. I'm always happy when the cover comes together.
It's an amazing one. And just for the sake of new viewers, I mean, those who are just discovering Dick's book in Death's Company, and of course, without giving much information away, could you give us a sneak peek into some of the themes, subject lines,
Mhm.
message, your mission that we will be experiencing picking up the book, and also what you particularly aim to achieve with the story?
Yeah. So In Death Company follows two main characters. One is Lady Death herself, so she's one of the main characters, and
Yeah.
then your other one is May, who she works as a medical examiner investigator. So over in the United States, I don't know how it is in the UK, but the United States, all deaths fall under the investigation of like a coroner or a medical examiner, and so she works there. And
Oh.
so it follows these two characters dealing with death and soul collection and the investigation of the deaths and how those two things intersect. into solving the mystery of who's stealing the souls and if they're connected to the deaths that May is investigating.
Mm, I love your take on that. That is so true and so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for
Thank
mentioning.
you.
Absolutely. That's an amazing one. And you know, Death in your story isn't just an abstract force. She's a character with her own voice, temperament,
Mm-hmm.
often coffee
Mm-hmm.
preferences. How did you decide on her personality and the quirks that shape a dynamic with Appa? I would like your take on that.
Yeah, so I really wanted death to feel kind of abstract and eternal and immortal because I mean death is if we were to personify death, she would be an immortal creature. So I really wanted her to feel other, but I
Mm,
also had to balance making her relatable to readers, or else no one is going to want to care about what happens to death. So I had to balance making her strange enough that she seems other, but then still relatable enough that readers enjoyed her, which is where the coffee preferences come in and some of her temper that is just a little bit more human than probably a mortal being. But then I was able to give her enough weirdness and she can't really relate to May on some human level because she's not. And so I gave a lot of like misunderstandings between the two of them to emphasize how she's not human and May is.
wow, that's an amazing description. That's an amazing description of
Yeah.
her future. And also, you know, you set the story in a small Arizona city, Oasis Point,
Mm-hmm.
and then construct that with the underworld. How do you balance writing two very different words, the mortal plus supernatural, so the reader can, you know, move between them without getting lost? How did you do that?
Well, I definitely made sure to keep. So the underworld is Harper slash Lady Death. That's her domain. And then May lives in the Arizona city. So I made sure to keep the two settings isolated to those point of views.
Yeah.
And those point of views and the settings of those worlds really defined those different characters. So they weren't intermingling in the settings a lot. And so I was able to keep them very separate that way.
That's a beautiful technique you've utilized there. That is so important
Mm-hmm.
and so interesting. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And you know,
You.
the book also weaves together murder mystery, supernatural love, and a
Mm-hmm.
sapphic romance, in brackets, slow burn, as it called. Now, what were the challenges of
Mm-hmm.
blending these elements so they all feel integral and not just tackled on? If there's any challenges you experience during this process, I would like to hear some of it, or all, if possible, if time allows us.
I wanted to make sure that the murder mystery was a little bit separate from the supernatural murder mystery element that's happening with Lady Death because I wanted to weave them into the second act where you realize they're connected. So in
Yeah.
the beginning, it was a lot of keeping these two mysteries separate, and one was a mundane human problem, and one a supernatural Harper death problem, and it's not until the second act where you realize they might actually be connecting. So I had to write it as if there's two separate mysteries coming at first to
Mm,
keep it separate because I was getting confused, and then later you're able to
merge
merge them.
together. That's a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
style. That's an amazing techniques you've utilized. Quite important and
Thank
quite nice. And you know, you
you.
also your voice have been described in reviews that I read on Amazon and elsewhere as sarcastic, as sharp, but also tender in
Mm-hmm.
place. How do you decide when you lean into humor versus when to let the
Mm-hmm.
darker emotional weight take over the story? I would love your take on that
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah. So I work my day job as a homicide detective, and so I there's a lot of dark humor involved in our coping mechanisms, and so
Mm,
I was able to utilize a lot of just how me and my coworkers deal with things in really dark situations. We become quite sarcastic, and we use a lot of dark humor. So I was able to mirror that into some of the darker situations
mm,
as levity so it doesn't get too dark. But then there is a scene later with May and one of the homicide detectives that she's partnered with.
yeah.
And I wanted it's a quite emotional scene dealing with some after effects of some trauma. And I really wanted to that to be quite realistic. And so instead of making light of it, I leaned into the more emotional aspect of it, and I didn't make light of the darkness, and I actually leaned into that. So I use my experience in my day job a lot to figure out when does it need to be
Added.
tension, and when does that tension need to be drawn out, and
Mm,
when does that tension need to be broken because it's too much. And so I use a lot of my life experience in trying to
wow.
write those scenes so that they feel realistic. I also write my conversations and like my scenes um, kind of by the seat of my pants. I have a general idea of what I want to achieve in each scene, but I
Mm,
don't plot it out. So I write it as it's coming to me, and so they feel a lot more organic, and then I can fix it later on the back end. But I kind of just write as the conversation itself is evolving, so it's less structured. And
mm.
I think that lends itself to a more natural flow sometimes.
Mm, that's a lovely style you've utilized in there. I love your description of that. It's so important. And that you work as an homicide detective during the it's something because sometimes I think experience and work experience particularly can give us good clue of a nice story. The people you
Mm-hmm.
talk to, the stories you've heard, the people you've had to deal with, it's so interesting that you from there you can get so
Mm-hmm.
many ideas coming into you. Just like somebody who works as a cop, as a
Mm-hmm.
policeman, or a lawyer who has attended to so many cases of people coming to you with so many issues, stories about divorce, stories about this, about that. So there's a lot you feed yourself with. And Father decided, I think I need to tell a
Mm-hmm.
story based off all of the stories I've heard. Amazing,
Mm-hmm.
interesting, heartbreaking, moving,
Yeah.
gripping, tearful,
Mm-hmm.
sorrowful stories. You know, Quite interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to use a lot of the things that I see, because I see people and I interact with people all the time, and
Mm,
I see how people interact at their worst and how they interact when they at their best. And so I'm able to pull a lot of those situations and put
yeah.
them into my books. And I think that lends to a lot more of the credibility and the realistic
Wow.
conversation flow that are happening.
That's amazing to know. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
You
you.
know, one of the things that I love about literature or about reading books generally, irrespective of the genre is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinion. And sometimes some readers might get the message that the author or the writer of that particular piece of work, try to convey. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far from getting the message, say several miles or several kilometers away. And most of the times they might misunderstand the entire book and interpret it upside down. You know, as interestingly fun as that sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
Most of the time I take it as a learning experience because it means that I did something wrong. If they're interpreting it so wrong, then it means that I did something wrong and that I need to learn and write better. And so I take it as a learning experience and trying to figure out what in my writing did I not portray as clearly as I thought I had, that they are interpreting it wrong. But also, depending on how they interpret it, I also take it as like, well, that's cool. I didn't think of it that way.
Hmm.
That isn't wrong, but it's also a really cool way of interpreting it. Like, I love it. So I really enjoy it. It's the world doesn't exist in a vacuum, neither do books. And so just because I meant it to mean one thing, but somebody else takes something else from it, that's
Yeah.
how their lived experiences, it's how their paradigm sees it.
Hmm.
And I love that.
That is so interesting of you to mention. And I would also like to ask you because readers have talked about how the tone shift from dark, mysterious to moment of humor or coziness. How do you
Mm-hmm.
manage tone changes so they feel natural rather than,
Mm-hmm.
jarring? I would love your take on that too.
Yeah, a lot of that is my writing style. So I really don't plot much.
Mm,
I'm what a lot of people call a pantser, where I just kind of wing it. And so a lot of my scenes, I just kind of write as they're happening. I discover what's going on just with my characters. And so a lot of that is me trying to just write it as it comes. And sometimes that works. Sometimes my editor is like, hey, that's really wrong. You should fix that. But
Oh,
a lot of it is also trying to establish what I want to achieve in that scene. So if I want something to be more mysterious, then I'll definitely lend into
mm,
that vibe a little bit. And if I want it to feel like a jarring situation, then I lean into that a lot more. But a lot of it is just I'm discovering the story a lot right along with my characters, and then a lot of it gets fixed on the back end.
mm. That is so amazing to know, actually. That is really interesting to know. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning. And apart from In-Depth Company, do you have any other works that you've authored or say currently working on? Do you?
Yeah, so I my other series. So this was my first adult fantasy series. My other one is a young adult fantasy called the Shadowstalker series.
Wow.
Books 1 through 3 are out, and I'm slowly working on book 4, which will end that series.
Wow. That's interesting.
I don't really have a pub date for that one yet. It's coming soon, eventually.
That is really interesting. I mean, it's amazing how writers from one book move to another. There's a lot of ideas screaming on one's head. Write me, write me, write. I'm like, hold on a while. I need to
Mm-hmm.
take some break. I'll get back to you. I know I need to write you, but could you just give me some
Mm-hmm.
while? Let me breathe, you know, give me some breathing
Yeah, a
space, you
hundred
know.
percent. That's what happened. Yeah, that's what happened. In-Death Company was screaming. It needed to be
Yeah,
written, so I took a break from the Shadowstalker. I did this one, and then I should be going back to the Shadowstalker series, but another idea has popped in, and
yeah.
I'm working on that one right now.
That is so interesting to know. Thank you for sharing. And I wanted to ask you, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges that you've encountered in the process of writing this book and also ever since it got published, even anyway?
I think the biggest challenging is just like marketing and being heard in the void.
Mm,
There are so many books out there right now. They're all and the fantasy genre is super oversaturated.
mm,
It's extremely popular right now. Biggest challenge is just standing out amongst the sea of other amazing that are coming out right now.
that's amazing. That's a very great one. Thank you. And as a published author, what sort of advice would you give other writers, those who are still stuck in some ways writing a book and they cannot finish it currently, or maybe they are distracted, or they are just off of the idea, or the whole storyline is not flowing anymore in their head, or those who are just struggling with whatsoever thing is it that is getting them stopping at the moment? What sort of advice would you give people in this category?
Write what you have down. It doesn't have to be pretty. Most of
Mm,
the time, the first draft isn't pretty. Just
yeah.
write it down. If you have a scene in your head, but you don't know how it connects to the rest of the story yet, write that scene, and you'll figure it out later. Just stop
Mm,
thinking about it so hard and put the words on the paper. You'll clean it up later. That's
yeah.
my biggest advice. I think people get they get too stuck in their head about it needing to be perfect the first time around.
Mm,
That no, my half the time my first draft manuscripts are a bunch of brackets of end the scene somehow and something cool happens here, and then I just move on because I don't know yet, and so I write what I do know, and then I'll come back and fix it later. So
mm,
don't stop thinking about it so hard and just write the words.
that's a good one, actually. That's a very good advice you've got in there. Thank you. Just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of In Depth Company, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
So it's available on Amazon. You can also get print copies from my website directly if you would like, but all of them are available on Amazon.
Oh, that's interesting. Amazing. And I left a link in the description page of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Natalie books directly on Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, on our website, and also on other platforms. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Natalie, for joining me today to talk about In-Depth Company. And also, this is so fun, interesting, compelling, and quite captivating. And I'm so enthralled with the description of In Debt Company. Quite an amazing one. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
Yeah, my pleasure as well.